Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Destiny Movie Night Hangout. I'm your host here, Mike, and I'm with Talaman and Andrea. Hey,
Hello.
guys.
Hi.
And today, for those of you watching, we are watching the TV series Black Sails. If you haven't watched it, I strongly suggest you do
Your
so.
sound is kind of going, Mike.
Storyline, which really, from the story, can take you into a lot of different questions into the history of things, into the world of things. Um, I'm not going to go into a full summary of the story because there's 3 seasons of the show and so much happened in each season of the show that it would probably take a long time just to go through the whole story of each season of the show. But without further ado, I'm just
Mike,
going
your
to
sound kind of
jump to
went
you
down.
first, Alamin, and
I guess you
tell us
can.
what stood out for you in watching this show. What would you like to share with everyone here today?
Something
Alamin?
happened to the sound. Something happened to the sound, Mike.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Could you hear me the whole time, or is it just Talman's sound?
No, I heard you, but it was lower.
Oh, okay. Is that better now?
Yeah.
Okay. So I was just saying, tell us what stood out for you in watching Black Sails. What did you like about it? What would you like to share with anyone who hasn't seen it maybe yet?
Andrea?
Oh, okay. Um, well, for one thing, I love pirate stories. I loved the Treasure Island when I was a kid. I liked the whole fantasy of what I thought pirates were about. I liked anything that has to do with rebelling and retaliating against the British. I like stories like that. So I found it a fascinating look into piracy. I like history. The characters are really good. The acting's really good. The characters are really well built. There's some really interesting threads, and uh, you get to see who is the bad guy, who is the good guy. They're all bad. They're all good. Uh, um, it's not much more I could say at this moment.
Yeah, I can agree with you that most of the players of this story are so multi-level that one day I could say that one guy is really, I don't know, selfish or evil, and then as the story unfolds, it turns out that he can change or he's just not that simple as it seemed. And for me, this series look like more close to reality, so to speak, because the characters I couldn't fit them into simple boxes. And yes, also pirate story and awesome sea fights with the ships and cannons. And also I like the costumes. And of course, this the whole story of they try to make alliance with each other, which are constantly changing according to the current flow of the power and how they adjust to this flow of powers. I really enjoy that. And also the characters, I could go into details, but for introduction, I really enjoyed the show.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, I totally relate, Telman, with what you say about the characters. Me and Andrew were just discussing that before. That all the different characters, they all have their evilness about them, if you will. Like, there's no one that's inherently good the whole way through, so to speak. That there's kind of that thing you want to, let's say, root for the pirates the whole way, but it kind of goes back and forth with, like, what is best or what is not best, kind of thing. And yeah, that really adds to what you're saying, just about there being so many dimensions to the pirates. Something that I found very interesting just with the pirates, I always thought was kind of cool, is how they kind of like rule themselves to an extent. Like, there is the captain, and they are, influenced by the captain, but there's kind of like their own pirate code, if you will, and that if somebody, rocks the boat, so to speak, like acts out against the best interests of the group, it's accepted basically that there's going to be consequence for them, and they kind of all subscribe to that code. And it even to the extent, I remember when Flint and Blackbeard, were having like issues about Vane, like is Vane gonna come like with Flint and fight, or is he gonna stay with Blackbeard, who is like the father figure for him? And they have a sit down about it, and it's kind of like, well, I really want it this way, and he's like, well, I really want it this way. And so they had, like their principles in place, and it's like, well, okay, like let's have a duo, so to speak, and they had their, method where how they were going to fight to the decision, but ultimately it was going to be, a standing decision, and yeah, I found that to be quite interesting.
Well, I think for the whole premise of the whole series is the starting point of the British, which was Britain controlling all the world and colonizing the whole world, and there was a whole slave trade. A lot of the characters are slaves that escaped from the slave trade. There is that ultimate control, and then they're at war with Spain as well, and Spain's trying to control their colonies, and this whole mapping out of the world, and but at the same time, there's all these guys who were on those British ships who jumped ship basically because they didn't like the control, they didn't like the humiliation, the how they were controlled by the British. It's a very regimented system. There's also with Spain, like one of the guys who was on the Spanish boat said, if I don't do this and I don't do that, they're going to go back into Spain and kill my family. So he had to be the perfect sail person on the ship. So there was just the whole control. So here are all these renegades retaliating against that control and creating their own domain, their own world, which was Nassau. But then as soon as they went to Nassau, they were fighting amongst each other for what they get and the booty and the which sometimes they had to join forces to move some good treasure, or sometimes they had to fight each other. So they basically just kind of became like the oppressor becoming the slave becoming the oppressor. It's the same story throughout time.
Totally. What I found also interesting is just the ironies, I guess, with pirates or piracy, and like let's say how these points still exist today, but you say who the pirates are in real life are clothed in different clothes, if you will, or are not regarded as pirates, so to speak, but also just like the terms around banking, if you will, and money or treasure and gold. Like, what did...
The Treasury of the United States.
Say that again, Andrea?
The Treasury of the United States.
Right. And like the Skull and Bones secret society or fraternity, whatever you want to call it. All these kind of just correlations to it, and where do people who have lots of money put it? Offshore bank somewhere. Where is like the offshore bank is on one of these islands kind of thing. It's buried. It's deposited, if you will. Yeah.
It's the same story. Actually, it's the same story, just with different pictures. But there are still pirates. Just we don't call them pirates, and it's fascinating, the analogy. And that's what I like about this series, because it's not some far universe like Game of Thrones, but it's actual current reality and history, just showing us how ridiculous these laws and treasure hunts are actually.
Mm-hmm.
Totally.
So for me, I've studied a lot of history, studied a lot of law and how banking and law works, and how everything that we come to hold dear is actually a lie. Everything is a lie. So, and I could go into very deep pockets with that. But, you know, a lot of the terminology in law and how it's run is all on the sea and admiralty, the high seas. There are real pirates today. Um, you know, I could go endlessly into that. The letters of marque, all that kind of thing. Don't have time to do that today, but if you're interested, check it out. But yeah, the players might be different, but it is the same story. And just with the last financial crash, a lot of the banks that were in the Caribbean became insolvent, and the U.S. Went in and they started all kinds of new laws to make sure people can't hide their money offshore. So yeah, it's just a circular thing. It's just goes over and over and over again.
Didn't the initial advent of corporations, like the first beginnings of corporations, originate from these shipping laws? Like, was it the East Indies
Absolutely.
Company that was like merchant shipping or something like that?
All laws are come from the high seas, from commerce, admiralty law. So it's all been put onto the land as an overlay. So everything is considered that you're still at sea. And in fact, you are lost at sea when your mother registers you with your birth certificate. You are lost at sea, and you have 7 years to claim your estate. Like if somebody gets lost at sea, which actually there's another series called Poldark that you have to watch sometime, Mike, because it's about a guy who went to fight the American Revolutionary Wars under the English, and then he came back. They all thought he was lost, and he had to claim his estate, and so that's part of the law. So yeah, it's still the same thing. We're all on the high seas. Most of us are dead and lost at sea. You can claim yourself back on the land, and that's a process.
Right. That was pole dark, you said, like Pole dark.
Without the E, full dark.
Pole dark. Okay, noting it. And
I'm always a fan of any kind of British anything that where I can learn little things about how it works, because it still works. There really was no Revolutionary War. It was just, as you said, it was corporations came onto the land. They subdivided, did all kinds of things. There's lots of information out there if you want to check it out. With the Dutch East Indies Company and the British East Indies Company. And basically, that's one thing about this series, is that they didn't really show the real masterminds. They make it like it's the British Navy, but there's the guys behind it who were the elite. They're the ones who had divided up all the colonies and wanted all the trade, all the tobacco and the gold and cotton, you name it. They were the ones that forced all the hands. It wasn't really the British Navy that did that.
right. Who knows? Maybe in the next season they'll take it and you'll see some maybe the behind the scenes players. But I have no idea where it's going to go in the next series. I was very much surprised and saddened to see Charles Vane be taken out.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I guess he kind of played the Jesus Christ role in the show, being kind of martyred for the greater good, because it was like Billy there kind of had the decision of are we gonna try to save him here, or Charles kind of made the stand, or made the eye signal that no, like, let him take me down here. This is gonna cause waves, kind of thing. And
Well, actually, my favorite line in the whole thing was that when he's in prison and
The priest comes.
the clergy says, "I'm here, I'm your shepherd," and he said, "No, you're not. You're the sheep." And so he was a man who lived by his principles, stood by his word, right till his death, and I kind of like that he stuck it to him, actually.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it was good. It showed him to continue with his character being like very noble, like well, honorable, probably, perhaps a better word. Um, but yeah, just it was nice having him there because like go back the season before, and him and Flint had it out. Them being kind of like on opposite ends of the piracy kind of thing. But Flint has been captured, by the British, and he rounds up all the troops and is like, you know what, we're going in. We're getting Flint out of here because with him we're stronger than without him. And put the emotional differences, the opinions aside, and again just like stood for like the best case scenario for the group kind of thing. And that was cool to see because leading up to that, you'd seen some of his like emotional like or his anger about it, like the little things that don't necessarily matter so much, but yeah, to see the bigger picture and to operate at that level is pretty cool.
Yeah, it was like a kind of competition feeling between them. Like these titans are going to clash at some point. They were building up this point, and then it was so cool when they formed this alliance and together they fought. And yeah, it was kind of friendly competition from that moment. It transformed, and then from that point they stood again together against the British and this navy, and then yeah, it was cool.
Well, I think one of the cool points is that they teamed up with the slaves,
Oh
and
yeah.
and they were run by the women. The women were the head of the clan.
Yeah,
It wasn't the men, and they were very powerful and had been protecting themselves for a long time, hiding out on an island. And
Way they showed way more power like and control than any one of the pirates had. Like you see, Flint and Silver talking afterwards about like how they would have managed their guy, their particular situation, and and then the woman, it's just like she says a few words, and it's like it's very well understood, like deep. Interestingly enough, though, you see with that guy Silver really comes a long way in his leadership abilities, and that's quite interesting. Like with that specific guy who had betrayed his mates and went to beat up that slave who had caused trouble to their crew when they were captured by those slaves. Um, just Silver's just masterminding abilities coming a long way and seeing big picture and getting the guys to work with him, and how really that evolved from Silver initially being just the guy totally out for himself in the very beginning, like just looking to make a quick steal here or a quick con here, but not really giving two hoots about anyone other than himself, and then finding him in circumstances where it's very much a sink or swim situation for him, and he proves his worth, he creates his value on this ship through giving all the mates the information and kind of making a mockery of himself, kind of being like the court jester in a way, in a sense, just how he just got up there because he was getting the piss taken out of him still in the beginning, but he just kept doing it, and yeah, fascinating his character unfoldment.
so you're saying in the end he worked what was best for all?
I think so. Well, I mean, you could say the Navy and whatnot might think otherwise on that, but in terms of
the crew.
yeah, the crew. I mean, that's the thing to consider is that in these what's best for all, I don't think you could say any of the sides because they're dealing with like major conflict scenarios here, and each person's in their positioning based on their education or their status and where they fall on the line, so to speak. But yeah, I definitely maybe a bit of a bias towards the pirates and the slaves.
But one of the things they never touch on either is what's behind all of it, which is that where did they get all this wealth from?
Mm.
Well, they plundered all of the Americas, and they had all these routes that they brought up from South America and from the Four Corners with all the gold, all the artifacts, and all that stuff that was going on the Spanish ship. They pretended like they owned it all, but then they killed millions of people in
Yeah,
the
they pillaged
Americas
over everything.
to bring it, and everything was cataloged and categorized to go back to Spain, so, I mean, that's not even brought into the whole story.
Yeah, that's kind of a good point. Well, and a major big point really in the history of things of just the whole theft that, any country's wealth in this world is that the war, the travesty that goes along with it, and that there is no real, greatness, you could say, in a country's power dominance in the world. That's
But it's amazing how like people would relate to that, like our country is doing this, our king is doing this. But they were all enslaved to it, and they weren't the ones that were getting rich from it. It was just the elite who got rich. But people were so patriotic to the like British Empire dominating and ruling the world. That was the program. The system programming is the patriotism and the we fight for the God save the king and all that stuff.
right. Right. Yeah, I mean, patriotism in itself, I always found to be like a very comical thing, really, in a lot of ways. I remember just on a very simplistic level, like as a young child, being made aware of the Olympics and thinking like, what a joke this is. It's like, okay, so this country's this size, and you have them competing in their sports against each other, and it's like this big deal, rooting for your team versus the other team, that country. And just kind of like what a joke of it all is. It's like, yeah, like just such a big focus, and yeah, I mean, a farce really. Like as a little kid and growing up in Canada, so it was like, watch the hockey. Canada's good at hockey. Watch our hockey team. And I'm watching the Canadian hockey team play like, Belarus or, some other like tiny little country, and everyone's getting like excited as we crush them. And it's like, okay, like how many people play hockey in Belarus versus, Canada, where it's like, oh, that's if you're Canadian and it's cold outside, that's what you do, or it's encouraged type of like physical activity. And just all that like goofiness about it, not really even looking at the math on it of like, the players or whatnot, and not really not a real good example of sportsmanship and the whole just integrity of the sport itself, which is interesting because as I got older, I learned just about the whole reasoning behind the Olympics and how it initially was. It was just like the wealthy people in was it Rome, that it was only the elites that could participate in the track and fields and whatnot, and it was just like an entertainment thing for all the slaves, the masses, to just kind of watch because they weren't wealthy enough to even be able to participate in sport.
Well, I think the reason why everybody really relates to the pirate stories is because deep down we know we're screwed in a system where only the wealthy are ones that have everything and the rest don't. And there's something about pirates because they were like, screw the system, we're going to go out on our own. And but they had some fatal flaws in their planning. But like the thing about Captain Flint is just that he came from that place, but he wasn't of the aristocracy, right? He wasn't the high. He was good at what he did, and they were going to use him. But his whole motivation and everything that he learned from being in the British Navy, he used in his pirate techniques. So, and he got to really be opened up to who he was. And there was I won't give the spoiler in case you haven't seen it, but there was a kind of a shocking thing about his character, something that happened to him in England, and it really shows why he was so driven to do what he was going to do. And actually, it was for a noble cause on some misguided level, you know. And then he just found himself going darker and darker and darker. But he did have an altruistic motive.
Yeah, because he participated within this aristocrats play within the high society, and then he saw that it's all a lie, and basically they just play around and plunder everywhere, and then they just use everyone.
And even who he thought was his friend ended up betraying him when they were in Charlestown.
Yeah, the
Um, uh,
governor.
and so, so that's why he kept getting darker, is because of that he could trust no one. It's kind of similar to today, I would think. It seems that way in all the money fields, the banking, the politics. Everybody's out for themselves. There's really no. It's a scramble now. It's really nothing about let's make this planet work. It's all about the top people playing with us.
Totally. One con onto the next, onto the next. And to just add to what you said about Flint's character and the circumstances he faced, like the traumas, if you will, using that to kind of like catapult him into a different direction, action, is kind of like, he could be totally defeated within like his own self-victimization based on the traumas that were done unto him, or it was kind of like, okay, this is the reality of it all here, like some harsh stuff here. But what's my best play? Like, can I look at a bigger picture, greater good in my actions, and kind of carve out a path for myself here in this world in some way? Like, where can I fit in with my knowledge and what I've experienced in this system, and how can I move forward? And in a lot of ways, we're all at different parts of the world, everyone within this world system, and I think that's kind of the scenarios we're faced with today as well, where people are in different sectors doing different jobs. Maybe they see the reality behind the curtain of what they're participating in, or how it works to a certain degree. Not to say that any one person has all the puzzle pieces, uh, but basically, there is opportunity. I think we're approaching, a time with just the amount of discussion through the internet and whatnot that I think there's a potential for a tipping point in terms of the direction of things in the world. Obviously, that's an extensive process, and Andrea, you've talked about some of the methods and ways in which that seems to be plausible reality with the status correction and the estate structuring and some other things.
Yeah, it's becoming taking your stand and not being a slave to the system. Most people don't know what that means. They have no idea how the system works, so they don't know that they're a slave in it. So, it really requires a education first of how it really works, because the programming is so deep of how we think it works, and we're all trying to make it work in a way that makes no difference whatsoever, which is like the political system, the monetary system. It doesn't make any difference because we don't understand how it works. And but just switching back to something which you haven't brought up, which I'm really surprised, because the two main characters are Eleanor and Frenchie.
Right.
And because they really do some switcheroos in this whole series, and they're quite amazing characters. I think they've really painted women quite amazingly, and Annie Bonny as well.
Yes. Yes.
You want to say something about that?
Yeah. Okay. It's just interesting, just as you bring it up there now. It's like you have these, like the main men leading players, but then also mirroring, or even is the leading women as well. And yeah, are just very well organized in their planning and their maneuvering and in their relationship wording of things. Like you see them play, especially Eleanor and the Frenchie, play different roles where you think like, oh, they're down and out or whatnot, or like they're being, bullied or whatnot. But they, each of them, in different capacities at different times, really hold their ground and orchestrate happenings to their, their best interest, their survival, and what they see as the bigger picture point of view, where it's like they're not just operating as just themselves out to like con everybody else, but they connect with the people of the place, and they create, I mean, they become the point of governance, really.
Well, the whole thing kind of made me wonder if that was at all possible, how they've done these characters, because you think back in the 1700s that women didn't have any say, right, or anything. I mean, I don't know if it's even close to reality that Eleanor could take over all of Nassau and run it, or and actually Mrs. Bartlett too. She was also a very strong character as well.
Yeah, I
I
was wondering about the same, that these strong, brutal men would just allow these women to even talk to them like this. I was not sure, but maybe.
Yeah, and the fact that Annie Bonny could like drive swords right through men's hearts, and that she was quite a powerful thing to be reckoned with as a pirate. I don't know if that's real fantasy or if there actually were women like that in those days. I don't know.
I think there could have been for sure, because I mean, it kind of reminds me of the whole like feral children or whatnot. Like if you're brought up in this environment, like Annie, for instance, she was on the her upbringing probably had something to do with her strength and her development and her skill and being able to fight and yeah, move on with that. I mean, definitely, I was surprised in the beginning seeing her as like, really, she's like a pirate. The guys are not just trying to, you know, take advantage of her, or whatnot. But yeah, I think anyone has the capacity to develop the skills and abilities, and given the right circumstances, like we were talking with like Flint and how he evolved, or how Silver evolved, or Eleanor or whoever their situation. I think yeah, I think there's potential there. I mean, I don't necessarily think that. Yeah, I don't know the extent. I mean, I think so much of the history of the world or what happened in the past has just been so suppressed that maybe yeah, there was powerful women. I mean, from what I gathered, the whole like churchhood and burning like witches, if you will, that to me was like regarded as the whole threat of women being like just like very powerful beings, and men seeing them just as a threat to the system, and the whole dominance and the way things are constructed being orchestrated. And so you can't have these women who are, I think, more natural born leaders, caregivers, if you will. And yeah, so yeah, that's my.
Definitely. I visited quite some sort of alternative communities in Europe, and some of them were like, how can I say, matriarchism, when the women are leading the community, and kind of families are around women and children. And these women, for me, seemed really, how can I say, sober-minded leaders, because they had kind of emotional life, but never intertwined with the decisions they had to make as leader. So I found them really good leaders. So I think women were deliberately suppressed during a history.
Hmm. Well, that's what's so interesting that I'm finding, because I never used to watch series or TV or anything for a long time, but I'm finding that writers are really opening things up to people, like the possibilities of other stories going on, things behind the scenes, things that made people the way that they are in opening that up. delving more into the human psyche and the unconscious mind, and because when we used to watch history when I was a kid anyway, it was just cowboys and Indians, or if it was a pirate, it was it wasn't like these really complex characters who had all these backgrounds, and and one of the things too, if you think about all the women in that thing, they all had relationships with each other, like love relationships. So and that sort of did all kinds of things to them within relationships of how they dealt with stuff. So I don't know if, you never thought of women in the 1700s being lesbians,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Seriously.
that is an interesting point because yeah, in the show they're all very like sexually empowered females. I mean, some of that I would say probably goes to just the whole modernized world today of sex sells a little bit, but their characters and the bonds they form with one another, like even Frenchie and Eleanor, like at the end they're kind of like not really on the same side, if you will, like, or supporting, but they do kind of come into like agreements. And then same with Aunt Bonnie, who's like way out there, but then she's kind of brought in. Like there's a certain level of regard for one another, each of them, despite their position, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, I kind of wonder if it was really like that.
I mean, that could be just a point of, yeah, it's a story. It makes, everybody loves each other. The women can't hate each other because got to leave the element of, maybe they're going to do it again.
But the whole thing with Eleanor kind of running all of NASA, and then all of a sudden completely. I know she's just in prison, so she makes the deal to work with the British governor. But that seems like a very strange thread to me.
Yeah, definitely. I was
Was she
surprised
doing
as
it out of survival? Was she doing it out of love? I mean, to have that much freedom, and she was running all the pirate ships and everything too, now being, and also sentencing Charles Vane, who she had a love relationship with,
Right.
to death is really strange too.
Yeah, I kind of hoped that they would go together again with Chas, and then they would just turn around Nassau against the Navy, but then it didn't happen.
I wonder maybe in the next season, you'll see like a switch of directions with Eleanor, and then it'll flash back to like a moment where they were in like the jail cell there together, and da 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 da. Like there was like a little maybe snippet of the conversation that was had that we didn't see. Who knows? But yeah, totally, definitely a surprise on her play.
But also Frenchie too. That seems kind of strange to me that she'd sort of, well, position herself so she could have the business, and
Big time.
that was kind of strange. But
I think for her it was the whole like, well, she's never gonna. It's like she didn't include herself to ever fit in as like a trio with Jack and Annie, as like the three of them sailing off into the sunset. And it was kind of funny because Jack was like, the two of them are like so into each other, and she was like, Annie and Jack are so into each other, like their bond is deeper. But they both had good bonds with like Annie, and yeah, it's kind of almost like, no, it was like she believed in her fate or like destiny beyond her doing so much, and that she just, that was like her home. I think maybe that could go into her origins, is that like she didn't have a good upbringing, home life, whatnot, and she'd kind of made NASA a home, and she was just sort of hedging her bets, as like, oh, I'm not leaving, I'm staying. Seems like this is who's going to be here.
But you bring up Jack, and I like his character one of the best, because when he did open up about how he got there, being a son of a tailor, and then his father owed debts, and then he was taken off, and so he had a history of that. He could have been just a normal guy, but then he was broke and ended up where he was, and but he had some. He was an interesting character. Let's put it that way. I liked him a lot.
Yeah, what was fascinating about him is, well, his ability to communicate and process points. Like new information comes along, he's looking at it this way, and you see like earlier on, maybe his ability to reason or do the math isn't as quick-witted as it is at the end. I mean, in the beginning, he still had certain wits about him, but he was maybe a little sloppier around the edges. But you see him, getting sharper as the show goes on, and like in the beginning, maybe him being a little sloppy, but he still had like Charles Bain's respect, like on that ship in the beginning, and he was kind of like his big brother in a lot of ways, and yeah, mentored him almost, kind of like groomed him into, the man we see he's become really, and into his potential so much so.
Yeah, definitely. And also when maybe the second season, he tries to build up his own reputation by designing the flag, kind of stuff.
The pirate already.
Yeah, that was really funny part. I'd like to bring up one point before I would forget. When at the end, Flint is talking with Silver about one point when he had to discipline this guy who makes the flip around Ornigold.
Yeah, the guy on the crew who like beat up the slave
Yeah,
who had
that
joined
point.
with them. What's that?
Yeah, and then at the fire they talk about it, and
Yeah.
then when Flint, I just typed in before I would forget that why were you're doing it? You hear the voice telling you that disciplining him would prevent him repeating the offense. A voice that sounded like reason, and there was a reason to that, as it was a reason to it. The most compelling lies comprised to almost entirely of the truth. But that's what it does, cloaks itself to whatever you must do. And the more you deny its presence, the more powerful it gets, and the more likely it is to consume you entirely without you even ever knowing him was there. So it was like his own mind and the darkness of his self-interest and this, I don't know, this pride, what he tries to just learn to use. And Flint is like the experienced guy who've been in the darkness already and still can keep himself kind of together. And that discussion was really interesting to me as well.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it went back and forth there. It kind of opened up just the mechanics of the mind and what we know with, our history as Destonians here. Uh, all the system play basically, and how, you feed it, it grows, and just the layering in the mind, how extensive it is. And like you say, with, Silver kind of like just getting into this and feeling like the power of the, like the ego of superiority, that he has like this potential, and kind of always having just looked at Flint and da 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 da. And yeah, I found it quite comical really, because Flint is, it's kind of like, if we referred it to, like process, in the mind, or working through the mind, it's kind of like, coming along and being like all energetic about it to an extent, or like, yeah, superimposing that, it's this is the outcome, or this is the way, or this is how it is, framing the picture, and then seeing that that's like one dimension of like the bigger picture, that there's so many dimensions to it, and just kind of having like a laugh about it at the same time, as like, oh, there's more here than meets the eye. I've been around a little while. I had a few experiences along the way. Da 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 da, and just kind of, it was kind of like a subtle way, and Flint kind of taking the piss out of Silver, but at the same time, like, as camaraderies, or as compadres, excuse me, and all the while, like, just causing Silver to further scratch his head, and kind of reflect and go into the points for himself, as like, fuck, like what the hell is this guy gonna say next? Like he's always surprising him as he's, further like intellectualizing, philosophizing like the know thyself of himself here kind of thing, and of man as the collective.
One of the things that this whole show brought up for me was one of the interviews I listened to, and I think it was Demons in the Afterlife,
Okay.
because the pirates kind of remind me of the demons. But it was a guy who was on the ship, and he was going to the new world, and he was really excited about that he was free and he was going to start a new life, and then he got pulled down by these two guys and they stabbed him to death, and he ended up in the demon dimension because he was so full of rage and anger that his life was taken. And when the portal opened, um, somebody came up to him. He was inside of this hologram of the ship. I don't know. Did you guys ever listen to that
I,
interview?
I recall that now that you're saying it. Yeah.
Well, it was right when the portal opened, and because he was so full of energy of the anger that he just kept circulating that one
Recycling.
memory over and over and over. And somebody tapped on the thing and said, "Hello, the existence has changed now." And he said, "Am I dead?" And he said, "Yeah, you're dead." And so he stepped out of the hologram and he looked behind, and the ship was still there. The ship, he created that so much in his mind over and over and over again.
Yeah, he trapped
Uh,
himself basically.
yeah, and so he just sort of walked away from it and went, "Oh." And so I was thinking about Flint, all those guys, everybody in the world.
Yeah,
We're all in our own hologram. We're circulating that energy over and over and over in our minds. Oh, he's a this or she's a that or they're, whatever, and we need somebody to kind of tap, hey, get out of that mind of yours. But um, that's what that reminded me of, that whole ship scene.
yeah. At some points, Flint seemed to me like he's insane, like playing against every odds possible, like risking like I don't know 1% with the dice all the time, and he keeps surviving, and then this builds up this energy, I guess, within the show as well as within himself maybe. Like he has
Mhm.
no doubt because he can die basically any day, but every one of us is living the same life, kind of, because we can die any day, and then it's just over. So what we gonna do today or tomorrow? It's
Mhm.
really becomes more and more relevant as we realize that what's inside also outside. So as I personally I walk the Destiny process now, and like within a 15 minutes of discussion, we can peel off so many delusions or I don't know layers of my own deceptions that it's astonishing that it's not something I can just let it go overnight. So I have to admit that humbleness is required and then accept assistance and support from each other. And it's really cool to meet you guys as well because we walk the same darkness, so to speak.
Yeah, it's very dark. It's a
Yeah,
very dark truth. But the thing is that there's still the pirates in the world. Who plays it? Sometimes it's one side, and the other. Things really haven't changed except for the fact that we have more technology and more, instantaneous sort of things. I mean, when they sailed across, it was a few weeks. Now I can talk to you right now in Hungary, and you're there.
yeah,
That was impossible back then, but have we changed as humans since then? Not really, not much, not at all. Actually, I think it's got worse because we can create more damage now with what we have with the bombs or artillery. Money. We can destroy people's lives in a second just by a flip in the stock market.
yeah,
So the whole onus is really on us to change ourselves and change the system. That's what we're here to do.
definitely.
Totally. Okay, I think that wraps up the hangout pretty good with those final words that you guys said. Any one last thing that you'd like to say before we say goodbye to everyone watching?
Aye, Mickey. See you in the next season.
Yeah, I can't wait to see how it's gonna continue.
Awesome, awesome. And for anybody who's new to one of these Hangouts, if you check the description, I've provided you with a free gift to the Desteni iProcess Lite course. It relates to what Telman was talking about with the Desteni iProcess. That's a step up from the Lite. You'll see when you check it out. It's a pretty cool introduction, and yeah, a cool journey you can take within yourself into asking yourself questions and really getting specific with your words and see what's going on within yourself at a, well, it gets pretty deep, really. How far you take it is really how willing you are to be self-honest with yourself. Okay, guys.
Okay.
Thanks, Yahar, mateys. And until next time, everybody, thanks for tuning in. We'll be back again next week. Stay tuned for an update. All right. See you guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.